Bound by lies, freed by truth. Mia's pulse hammered so loudly she could barely hear the judge's final words. Across the mahogany courtroom, Jin-woo Choi's gaze pierced through her like shards of ice. His tattooed hands, visible beneath his tailored suit sleeves, clenched the edge of the table until his fingers went pale. When the verdict rang out, guilty 18 years, his mouth curved into something cold and deliberate. It wasn't quite a smile. It was a vow. In that instant, Mia realized she'd just painted a target on her own back. But we need to rewind. We need to go back to where everything started. 4 months before that courtroom showdown, Mia had stepped off the plane in Seoul with nothing but ambition and wonder filling her chest. At 26, she'd finally scraped together enough from her non-profit job in Nairobi to pursue her graduate studies at Yonsei University. Her late mother, who'd studied abroad in Korea years ago, had filled Mia's childhood with tales of the city's magic. The palaces draped in history, the streets that never slept, the seamless dance between old and new. Now, wandering through the electric glow of Gangnam for the first time, Mia felt like she'd walked straight into one of those stories. Her classmates welcomed her warmly. There was Hannah, her study partner, who dragged her through endless shopping trips in Myeongdong. There was Min Jun, who taught her how to navigate Seoul's subway system without looking like a complete tourist. And there was Amara, another exchange student from Ghana, who became her roommate and closest confidant. One Friday night, Amara burst into their shared apartment with barely contained excitement. "You need to see Seoul after dark," she insisted, already pulling clothes from Mia's closet. "We're hitting this members-only spot in Gangnam called Velvet Sky. Ji-hoon got us in." Mia hesitated. Back home, she was the girl who volunteered on weekends and called her father every Sunday without fail. But something about Seoul made her feel different. Braver, more willing to step outside the lines she'd always colored within. "All right," she agreed, surprising even herself. "Let's go." Velvet Sky lived up to every promise. The bass thundered through the floors, beautiful faces filled every corner, and the energy dissolved whatever remained of Mia's usual caution. They danced until their feet ached, laughing and shouting over music that seemed to pulse with the city's heartbeat. Around 1 in the morning, Mia stepped outside for air. Her head felt pleasantly light from the heat and motion. The narrow alley behind the club offered cooler temperatures and blessed quiet. She leaned against the rough brick wall, eyes closed, smiling at the beautiful absurdity of her life. She was here. She was actually here in Seoul. Then voices cut through the stillness. Harsh, urgent, speaking rapid Korean. Her language skills were intermediate at best, but she caught fragments that made her skin prickle with dread. "Traitor. Lesson." Mia's eyes snapped open. About 40 feet away, partially obscured by a delivery van, she saw them. 6 men in dark suits forming a tight circle around someone on his knees. The kneeling man's face was swollen and bloodied, tears carving clean paths down his dirt-streaked cheeks as he begged. "Run," her mind screamed. "Run right now." But her body had turned to stone, frozen by sheer terror. One of the standing men moved forward, tall, powerfully built, radiating authority that needed no words. Even through the darkness, Mia could see the elaborate dragon tattoo winding up his neck from beneath his collar. His face held a terrible kind of beauty, all sharp angles and cold judgment. He spoke in Korean, too quick for Mia to follow, then pulled out a handgun. The shot cracked through the night like breaking glass. The man on his knees collapsed, his body going slack like something suddenly unplugged. Mia's hand flew to her mouth, trapping the scream clawing up her throat. Her entire body shook, but she couldn't tear her eyes away from the horror unfolding in that alley. The tall man, the killer, turned his head. For one eternal, nightmarish second, his eyes locked onto Mia's. Time fractured. She saw the exact moment he registered her presence, saw comprehension flash across his features, saw him understand that she'd witnessed everything. Survival instinct finally broke through the paralysis. Mia ran. She crashed back through the club's rear entrance, found Amara, and demanded they leave immediately. Her friend protested, confused by the sudden panic, But something in Mia's expression killed all questions. They grabbed a taxi back to their apartment, where Mia locked herself in the bathroom and was sick until nothing remained. She should have kept quiet. She should have buried it deep and pretended that night never happened. But the murdered man's face haunted every dream. His desperate pleas echoed in her head during lectures, meals, every quiet moment when her mind wandered. 7 days later, Mia walked into the Seoul Metropolitan Police headquarters and told them everything she'd seen. The detective's face drained of color when she described the killer. "That's Jin-woo Choi," he whispered, like speaking the name too loudly might summon something dangerous. "Do you understand what you're saying? Jin-woo Choi runs one of the most powerful crime syndicates in Seoul. People don't testify against Jin-woo Choi. People who try don't usually survive long enough to make it to court." But Mia's mother had raised her to stand for what was right, regardless of the cost. "That man had a family," she said quietly but firmly. "He deserves justice. I'll testify." The following 3 months became a living nightmare. Mia was placed under police protection, shuffled between safe houses, given armed escorts everywhere she went. Anonymous threats arrived constantly. Someone left a gutted fish outside her apartment door. Her phone rang at all hours with blocked numbers, sometimes silence, sometimes breathing, once a voice that simply said, "Bad decision." Then came the trial. Mia took the witness stand with trembling hands and spoke the truth about what she'd witnessed behind Velvet Sky. Jin-woo Choi stared at her through her entire testimony. His expression unreadable, but his eyes making promises she didn't want to understand. When the guilty verdict came down, Mia felt no victory, no sense of justice served, only the crushing awareness that she'd made an enemy who wouldn't forget. 2 days after the trial ended, she boarded a flight back to Kenya, leaving Seoul behind forever. Or so she believed. The call came at 4 in the morning, shattering Mia's sleep like dropped glass. Her Uncle David's voice was thick with grief. "Your Aunt Grace is gone. She passed peacefully last night. The funeral is in 5 days." In Seoul, Mia sat up in her Nairobi apartment, her heart breaking cleanly in two. Her aunt, her mother's sister, who'd helped raise her after her mother died, who'd taught her Korean songs and cooked her kimchi and palo fusion dishes, who'd been her bridge to a culture she loved, gone. And the funeral was in Seoul, the city she'd sworn never to return to. "I can't," Mia whispered. "David, you know I can't go back there." "She was your mother's sister," David said gently. "She loved you like her own daughter. And Jin-woo Choi is in prison. You're safe now." Mia wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe that an ocean and 3 years were enough distance. That prison walls were sufficient protection. Her therapist had been encouraging her to confront her fears rather than running from them. Maybe this was life forcing her to heal. "I'll be there," she finally said. The words felt like stepping off a ledge. 48 hours later, Mia landed at Incheon International Airport. Seoul greeted her with overwhelming familiarity. The rapid Korean announcements, the scent of coffee and fresh pastries from airport shops, the controlled chaos of one of the world's busiest terminals. Her hands shook as she cleared immigration, every uniformed officer making her flinch with irrational fear. David picked her up in his compact sedan, chattering nervously about funeral arrangements, obviously trying to distract her from her anxiety. As they drove through Seoul's streets, Mia pressed her face to the window, watching the city blur past. Everything felt simultaneously familiar and foreign, like half remembering a dream. The funeral took place at her aunt's home in Songbuk-dong, a traditional Hanok house tucked into one of Seoul's older neighborhoods. Mia threw herself into the rituals, bowing to mourners, accepting condolences, keeping vigil beside her aunt's photograph. The familiar customs wrapped around her like a comforting blanket, and for the first time in years, she felt something close to peace. On her 3rd night in Seoul, that peace exploded into fragments. Mia returned to her hotel in Myeongdong around 10 o'clock, exhausted from the day's ceremonies. The boutique hotel sat wedged between a cosmetics shop and a Korean barbecue restaurant. She rode the elevator to the 5th floor, already dreaming of a hot shower and sleep. The black orchid lay across her door handle like a coiled serpent. Mia's blood turned to ice. Her shopping bag slipped from numb fingers, contents scattering across the hallway floor. The flower was flawless, with glossy black petals that seemed to swallow the fluorescent light. Attached to the stem was a small card bearing elegant Korean calligraphy that she translated with shaking hands. "Welcome back." She ran, not into her room, which suddenly felt like a trap, but down the emergency stairs, through the lobby, out into Myeongdong's crowded streets. Her lungs burned as she pushed through masses of tourists and shoppers, not knowing where she was heading, just knowing she had to move, had to escape, had to. Her phone buzzed. Unknown caller. Her finger hovered over the decline button, but some self-destructive impulse made her answer. "Hello, Mia." The voice was smooth, educated, speaking English with barely a hint of accent. "Did you appreciate my gift?" "Who is this?" she demanded, though her racing heart already knew. "You testified against me 3 years ago. Surely you haven't forgotten my face." Jin-woo Choi. "You're in prison," Mia gasped, ducking into a side alley. "This isn't possible." "Prison?" Jin-woo laughed, and the sound sent ice down her spine. "I was released 8 months ago. Technical violation in evidence handling. My lawyers are exceptional, Mia. Almost as exceptional as your testimony was." The world tilted sideways. Months. He'd been free for 8 months, and she'd had no idea. "What do you want?" "To talk." "Just talk. My people will collect you in 15 minutes. Don't run. You won't reach the embassy. And I promise you, your Uncle David and his family won't enjoy the visit my associates would pay them." The line went dead. Mia's mind raced through her options. Call the police. But Jin-woo owned half the police force. Everyone knew that. Run to the embassy. But they were closed at this hour. And Jin-woo's threat against David wasn't empty. Try to disappear into Seoul's crowds. But she was a black woman in a homogeneous city. She stood out everywhere. She was trapped. Exactly 15 minutes later, a black Mercedes glided up beside her. 2 men in expensive suits stepped out, moving with military precision. These weren't street thugs. These were professionals. One opened the rear door and gestured politely, as if inviting her to dinner rather than a possible execution. Mia's survival instinct screamed, but David's face flashed through her mind. His wife. His 3 children. She couldn't put them at risk. She stepped into the car. They drove in silence through Seoul's nighttime streets, moving away from the bright tourist districts into quieter, wealthier neighborhoods. The car climbed into the hills of Songbuk-dong, ironically not far from her aunt's house, and stopped before a stunning modern mansion hidden behind high walls and mature trees. The men escorted her through a minimalist interior, all clean lines, dark wood, and understated luxury, to a private study overlooking the city. Floor-to-ceiling windows displayed Seoul's glittering skyline like an elaborate painting. And there, silhouetted against the lights, stood Jin-woo Choi. He looked different from the courtroom. His hair was longer, swept back from his face. He wore casual clothes, black pants and a simple white shirt with rolled sleeves, revealing the intricate tattoos covering his forearms. But his eyes were the same, dark, intense, burning with an intelligence somehow more frightening than rage. "Miss Okonkwo," he said, turning to face her fully. "Thank you for coming." "As if I had a choice," Mia shot back, her fear manifesting as anger. Something flickered across Jin-woo's face. Surprise, perhaps, or respect. He dismissed his men with a subtle gesture. They left, closing the door behind them. Suddenly, Mia was alone with the man she'd sent to prison, the man who had every reason to want her dead. Jin-woo poured 2 glasses of whiskey from a crystal decanter and offered her one. When she didn't move, he set it on the table between them. "I'm not going to harm you. Forgive me if I don't take you at your word. 3 years ago, you testified that you saw me execute a man named Kong Min-ho behind Velvet Sky. Do you remember?" "I remember everything about that night." Jin-woo's jaw tightened. "Tell me exactly what you witnessed. Every single detail." And this time I need you to truly think, Mia, because the man you saw kill Kong Min-ho, it wasn't me. Mia stared at Jin-woo Choi like he'd lost his mind. You're delusional. Saw you. I looked directly into your eyes before I ran. You saw someone who resembled me, Jin-woo corrected, his voice eerily calm. He walked to his desk and retrieved a thick manila folder. Someone wearing my face. Someone who needed you to see him, to testify, to remove me from the picture. And it worked flawlessly. He spread photographs across the glass table between them. Mia's hands trembled as she examined them. Surveillance photos, medical documents, police records. Her breath caught when she saw one particular image. A man who could have been Jin-woo's identical twin, right down to the dragon tattoo on his neck. Lee Sang-min, Jin-woo said, his voice hardening with barely restrained fury. My former lieutenant. My brother, I thought. He's a master of disguise, studied theater at university before joining my organization. The tattoo. Temporary but incredibly precise. It took me nearly 2 years in prison to piece together the truth. Mia sank into the leather chair, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. No, I would have known. I saw his face clearly. In a dark alley from 40 feet away while terrified for your life. Jin-woo's eyes softened marginally. Sang-min counted on that. He knew I'd be at Velvet Sky that night. I owned the place. He wore my cologne, my suit, even studied my mannerisms. And he made certain you saw just enough to be convinced, but not enough to notice the subtle differences. Why? Mia whispered. Why would he do this? Because I refused to expand into human trafficking. Jin-woo's voice turned to ice. Sang-min wanted to diversify our operations. I have lines I won't cross, Miss Okonkwo. I may be a criminal, but I'm not a monster. When I refused, he decided to eliminate me and seize control. Your testimony was the perfect weapon. Mia's mind reeled. Everything she'd believed for 3 years, her courage, her sacrifice, her righteousness, was crumbling like sand. If this is true, why didn't you say something during the trial? I didn't know then. Sang-min was methodical, patient. By the time I figured it out, I was already 20 months into my sentence. And who would believe me? A convicted killer claiming he was framed. Jin-woo leaned forward, his intensity pinning her in place. But now I have proof. And I need your help. My help? Mia laughed bitterly. You threatened my family to get me here. Why would I help you? Because Sang-min knows you're in Seoul. And unlike me, he won't hesitate to kill you. You're the only witness to that murder. As long as you're alive, you're a threat to him. Especially now that I'm free and investigating the truth. As if summoned by speaking his name, Jin-woo's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression went cold. We need to leave. Now. What? Why? The explosion shattered the windows, throwing Mia to the floor. Glass rained down like deadly hail as flames erupted from Jin-woo's desk. Strong hands grabbed her, Jin-woo pulling her up, shielding her body with his as another explosion rocked the house. Smoke filled the room, choking and thick. Move! Jin-woo shouted, dragging her toward a hidden panel in the wall. It slid open, revealing a narrow staircase descending into darkness. They plunged down as gunfire erupted behind them. Sang-min's men had breached the house. The escape tunnel was claustrophobic, lit only by emergency lights that bathed everything in hellish red. Mia's ears rang from the explosions. Her lungs burned from smoke. But Jin-woo's grip on her wrist was like iron, pulling her forward through the nightmare. They emerged in an underground garage where a motorcycle waited. Jin-woo threw her a helmet. Hold on tight. Don't let go. Mia barely had time to wrap her arms around his waist before he gunned the engine. They exploded out of the garage into Seoul's streets, the motorcycle screaming through traffic. Behind them, 2 black SUVs gave chase, their occupants leaning out windows with weapons drawn. Jin-woo drove like a demon, weaving between cars, jumping curbs, cutting through alleys too narrow for the SUVs to follow. Mia pressed her face against his back, feeling his heart pound, feeling the controlled power in his movements. This wasn't reckless driving. It was precision, skill, survival. They lost the SUVs in the labyrinth of Hongdae's back streets, finally stopping before a nondescript building wedged between a Noribang and a vintage clothing boutique. Jin-woo killed the engine, and for a moment they just sat there, breathing hard, alive against impossible odds. "Safe house," Jin-woo explained, helping her off the bike. Her legs nearly gave out, but he steadied her, his hands gentle despite their desperate situation. "Sangmin's people won't find us here." The apartment was compact but well-stocked, clearly prepared for exactly this type of emergency. Jin-woo checked the windows, secured the locks, then finally turned to face Mia. In the soft lamplight, she saw blood on his temple from flying glass. "You're hurt," she said, surprised by the concern in her voice. "I've had worse." But he didn't protest when she found the first aid kit and gestured for him to sit. As she cleaned the wound, their faces inches apart, something shifted in the air between them. "Why did you protect me?" Mia asked softly. "In your study you could have saved yourself. But you shielded me." Jin-woo's dark eyes met hers. "Because you were brave enough to testify for what you believed was right. Even though you were terrified, even though you knew it would cost you everything, you did it anyway. That kind of courage is rare. Worth protecting." Mia's hand stilled. This close, she could see the exhaustion etched in his face, the weight he carried, the humanity beneath the criminal reputation. "Tell me about Kong Min-ho, the man who died that night. Who was he?" Jin-woo's jaw tightened. "My cousin. My blood. He discovered Sangmin's human trafficking plans and was going to expose him. So Sangmin killed him and framed me in one calculated move. 2 birds, 1 stone." "I'm sorry," Mia whispered. "I'm so sorry. I helped him get away with it." "You were manipulated." "We both were." Jin-woo caught her hand, his thumb brushing across her knuckles. "But now we can make it right. Together." Mia looked into his eyes and saw truth there, raw and unguarded. She'd come to Seoul to bury her aunt. Instead, she'd found herself caught in a web of deception, danger, and an impossible connection with a man she'd once condemned. "Together," she agreed, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them. Outside, Seoul's neon lights flickered against the night sky, and somewhere in those glittering streets, Lee Sangmin was hunting them. But for the first time since that terrible night 3 years ago, Mia felt like she was on the right side of the truth. And this time she wouldn't run. If you enjoyed this thrilling tale of deception, danger, and unexpected connection, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and hit that notification bell so you never miss our next story. Drop a comment below telling us what you think happens next. Will Mia and Jin-woo be able to expose Sangmin's lies? Or will the past catch up with them before they get the chance? Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.